Hi, I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome. Today we are interviewing a candidate for the Duxbury School Committee, and his name is Dr. James Mehegan, but he likes to be called Jed. So welcome, Jed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. So we're going to get right into the questions, okay?
Sure.
All right, question one. One of the basic components to the powers and duties of a school committee member is public relations. And that is an area that is not often talked about or discussed. Because schools are such an integral part of the fabric and reputation of any town, how do you view this important aspect of committee membership?
Yeah, so I think the essence of that question lies in, well, there are a number of different ways of looking at it, but it lies in the belief, the real core belief of the importance of education in schools to society at large. So to everybody in a society, in a representative democracy, has a fundamental interest in a well-educated populace. So that's the position you have to start in. And that speaks not only to the constituent elements of the community that have a direct involvement with the schools, parents and teachers and so forth, but also those elements of the community that don't have an ongoing direct interest. And you have to be able to say to them, you too have an absolute necessity for excellent schools.
And why would that be important?
Let me speak, and then I'll speak more directly to the question.
Okay.
I think then you're talking about the conduits for advocacy. You're talking about being open both to transmitting information outward and receiving information inward from all elements of the community, and that has to be an ongoing effort.
Agreed. Do you think that Duxbury, up until this point, from what you've seen, has been successful in that?
I think the success has been variable over the years. I think there have been times when there has been sort of an us versus them notion to it. I don't think that is a necessary element at all. I don't think that is endemic to the enterprise of education. I do think it happens sometimes. And there is a natural tension between people who are paying for a product and not receiving direct results of the product. So I understand the natural tension, but I don't think the natural tension has to degenerate into ill will in any sense.
Mm-hmm. So what conduit would you think you would use to communicate back and forth between all the variable entities that need to know about the schools? What would you use as a platform?
So there are a number of platforms that exist. The ones that are institutionally in place have to do with school councils and so forth. They're natural conduits for parents to get input. For somebody on the school committee, I think it has to be somewhat more proactive. I think one has to sort of reach out. Would love to meet with the seniors who don't feel like they're involved, with students who don't feel that at an administrative level people are listening to them. So there's your top to bottom enterprise right there. I'm in the communication industry, and I would be perfectly happy to apply communicative efficacy to the enterprise.
Okay. And since you need to always meet people where they are and where they get their information, do you foresee that a school committee or a school district in general has to find all kinds of different pathways to get the information to the different stakeholders that need to know?
Well, you just answered that question. Clearly, the answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
Clearly, it has to be an ongoing effort, a dynamic effort in our changing modes of communication to both the outreach and the receptive part of it, to reach the different. You don't want any element of your community to feel like no one's listening, to feel disenfranchised in the process. It's no secret to you or to anyone else that schools make up close to 50% of the budget of a municipality.
Right.
Everyone has to feel like that's money well spent.
Okay, excellent. We're going to move on to question 2. School budgets make up a significant percentage of a town budget. Since Duxbury has a very limited commercial tax base, the majority of the funding for the school system is on the backs of the residents. How do you set priorities for budgetary expenditures when balancing the district's contracts, the curriculum, the student needs, the facility upkeep, and current technology?
Yeah, so let's back up. For all budgetary questions, you need to back up a little bit and look at what's going on. And this is not something that everyone wants to hear, but here's the nature of it. We live in a technological society. There is an underlying expectation in technological societies, almost an unspoken assumption that over the course of time, enterprises will become more efficient. And if you're talking about manufacturing, you're correct. No one expects an automobile to be made with as many man-hours of labor now as it was 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. But the problem you run into in labor-intensive enterprises, like medicine, like schools, like a number of different things, but medicine and schools come to mind, is that labor-intensive enterprises become relatively more expensive in the course of time. There simply is no way around that. And if you take apart the school budget, you'll see that the vast majority of it is non-discretionary. Mm-hmm. So what that means is, and again, this is hard for people to hear, and I understand the sticker shock when you open your property tax bill and look at it. I have the same reaction. Yeah. But if you start with the premise that you want excellent schools, you have to take a deep breath and understand that they're going to cost you more, mm-hmm. relatively speaking, in a year-over-year basis. Mm-hmm. In other words, what I'm saying is that the competitive production efficiencies of manufacturing do not translate to labor-intensive enterprises like policing, like medicine, and like schools. Mm-hmm. I'll give you the example that's always given. It takes a nurse just as long to bandage a wound now as it did 50 years ago. But you can't pay them the same. Right. It takes a teacher just as long to grade an essay now, or more importantly, to get to know your child. Mm-hmm. It takes a teacher just as long to do that now as it did 50 years ago. You can't pay them what you paid them 50 years ago. So if you say to a school, we want a level services budget. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that means provide the same services that you did last year. In the back of people's minds, what they're saying is we don't want to pay you anymore. Mm-hmm. But the reality of a level services budget is that the numbers will go up on a year-over-year basis. And relative to other costs, they're going to go up more than people would like to see. So
how do you address the fact that the enrollment is decreasing year after year overall in schools?
Now, that's a good question. Schools are always faced with demographic questions. So that's a good question. If you knew that there was a demographic issue unfolding, mm-hmm. then you could deliver maybe with fewer FTEs, maybe because if you could lower the FTEs mm-hmm. to deliver we know what we're talking about here, lower the number of teachers, yeah, right? If you could do that, then you could maybe you could shrink the budget. I don't know that exists. Does that exist? That we have a knowledge that there'll be a demographic shift? If that were the case, then you could look at the line items on the right. budget. You could look at the busing question. You could look at the FTE question. Right. You could look at things that have real budgetary consequences. Right. But if you are trying to deliver the same level of services to the same level of students, you're stuck. Okay. And also, there's mandates that happen with the state. How much of that affects the budget? Oh, well, let's for example take 94-142, the special education mandate. Yep. We don't have margin for discretion on those things. Special education needs are mandated by the state. Meeting the needs of the concept that in the United States we say we will deliver a free and appropriate education to all our students. Free mm-hmm. and appropriate. And it's, of course, the appropriate question that costs because a family looks at its child that has special needs,
Right.
and has in the United States of America, that is what we have undertaken to meet the needs of those kids.
Right.
And
Now,
I say rightfully so.
Now, you mentioned something about meeting with seniors, because that is a population that clearly maybe they had their children through the school system at one point, but they no longer do. So
Yeah.
what would be your messaging to those groups of people that no longer utilize the school system at all? Why is it so important to keep it as high a level as possible?
Yeah, it's what I was indicating a few moments ago. I mean, there are the ephemeral sort of concepts of community pride and
Yep.
so forth and so on, and that's fine. I'm an advocate for that kind of stuff, but much more basically, I'm an advocate for what I was referring to before, which is that senior citizens, along with all the rest of us, must be invested in the long-term excellence of our education as a constituent element of society at large. We live in the kind of society where we need our people, all of our people, to be well educated, to be discriminating thinkers, to be problem solvers. We don't know what the nature of those problems will be in 5 or 10 years, but we want good problem solvers at the helm when we confront them.
Excellent. Okay. We're going to go on to question 3.
Sure.
Are there more active discussions and plans for curriculum that is geared towards non-college bound students, like vocational students? Also, are there discussions regarding the use and ever-changing complexities of AI?
Well, okay, so there are two, I hear two embedded questions.
There are two questions in
First
there.
of them having to do, yeah, okay. So
Yep.
first of them has to do with the movement toward the not assuming that every single kid is going to go to a 4-year college. And second of all, the question of AI. So let me take those separate.
Exactly.
The former, I am a huge advocate of all possible alternatives for kids for kids to take paths to useful jobs after high school. I wish we had the funding to start a vocational school in Duxbury. I'd love to be able to do that. The capital expenditure associated with the founding of a vocational school is, I can't imagine it's within the capital abilities of the town. But yeah, it is a wonderful idea to open all different routes of access. And if you've been following the evolution of community colleges, so if you go online and look at the website for 4Cs or the website for Massasoit, you will see that they now offer a plethora of certificate programs that are, I think, excellent alternative paths for people getting out. And I think Duxbury should do everything it can to open up as part of its counseling, an open-minded approach to what comes next for our kids. As regards AI, if you knew or I knew how AI is going to impact, do I think AI is going to impact education? Absolutely. I think it's going to be foundational. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. At least that's the way it looks as AI appears on the horizon now. How exactly that will manifest, I don't think a single person knows. We don't know how it's going to manifest in industry. We don't know how it's going to manifest, God forbid, in politics. We don't know how it's going to manifest in education, but we think it will. So what that means from a curricular standpoint is that you can't look ahead 5 years and say, okay, we'll prepare our kids for that. What you can say is that what you can undertake is what I would call a dynamic approach to problem solving, a recognition. In the 1970s, a guy named Alvin Toffler came out with a book called Future Shock. And the premise of that book was that the pace of change was accelerating, right? I don't think anything has happened since 1970 to disabuse us of the notion that the pace of change is accelerating. So I think we as educators cannot be static. We must prepare our kids not with a body of knowledge that we think that they'll be able to use later on, but with a dynamic approach to problem solving
Okay.
and responsive. So as the new parts emerge.
So I have a follow-up question.
Mhm.
What if you, as a school committee member, have a parent come to you and say, my son or daughter spent hours and hours or weeks and weeks on their term paper. They got it back, they got a B minus. Their dearest friend, he or she, used ChatGPT to write their term paper and they got an A. What would you do? And that is happening now. So
Yeah.
what as a school committee, what do you think your stance should be on that? And how do you start to approach this obviously incredibly important discussion?
Yeah. First of all, in that particular scenario, I think I would say, with respect to the parent, that's probably not the conduit through which that problem should be solved. Probably you should be talking to the teacher and the department head and the school itself. I don't deny that I mean, what you're saying is my son's friend cheated. But we have not yet, if we're going to look at that from a broader perspective, we haven't yet decided as educators how we are going to allow or encourage the integrate. And ChatGPT is just an iteration of AI. It's
Absolutely.
not AI is going to it's going to be much more comprehensive than that.
Of course.
We are by no means societally resolved on the question of how we'll use these things. I'll point out to you that it's not that much different than when calculators first came on the scene, and every math teacher insisted that you not use a calculator, and now, of course, everyone uses calculators all the time. So I expect AI to be integrated.
Right.
I don't know how that'll happen.
But that was a policy change, I think, through all schools that not suddenly, but it took a while, but it was realized that, kids can use calculators. And that just became something that...
Why shouldn't they?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
so
why
that's
shouldn't they?
But what I'm saying is it'll end up probably being, or I'm asking you, do you think it'll probably end up being a policy decision by school committees everywhere, not just Duxbury?
Oh, I think it will be a policy evolution. Yeah, I absolutely think that we will we'll probably try to make policies, and they probably will blow up, and then we'll probably try to make another policy because it will be intimately involved. I can imagine. I mean, I'm an advocate for language learning. I can imagine so many scenarios where it would be so valuable for language learning. I think we're only at the beginning of mining the richness of how this will be useful in education. But yes, you're right, these ancillary problems will arise.
Right. Okay. One other, if I can circle back to the first part of the question, which was about the different avenues or paths for kids to go to schools. Now, I know if a child decides to go to a charter school, that the town has to pay for that school. Would the same thing be true of vocational schools, so that the town of Duxbury, if you don't have one to offer, that you would have to pony up the money for the students to attend?
I gotta be honest with you. I'm not 100% certain how we've had, I think, a fraught relationship with vocational schools on the South Shore. I think this goes back to I'm not sure if it was John Antonucci or Ben Tantillo who. I don't remember exactly what happened. I do understand that there were some complexities in the relationship between. So I don't know what the policy is now. I do imagine that there are costs associated with that. I do imagine we would love to be able to provide pathways ourselves.
Right.
And that's the way some schools do it. Of course, they invest in, for example, biotech pathways, but those are expensive as well.
Right. And do you have any idea of the percentage of students that graduate from Duxbury High School that go on to college versus don't? Do you know what the percentage is?
So we have traditionally been up in the 90s.
Okay.
For kids who go on to college.
Okay. All right. And now we're going to move on to question 4.
Sure.
School systems have morphed into much more than just classrooms. Recent developments in other nearby towns have brought up the question of expression. Whether it be a T-shirt that's worn, or a flag that is hung, or a flyer that is posted. Social subjects or political opinions are becoming more and more integrated into conversations and confrontations. Where do you stand on this entire subject?
You're absolutely correct. And you can pick up the newspaper any day and read that school committees have ended up by intent or without intent at the center of these. I think you always have to be, all questions that a school committee faces have to be guided by what the central function of a school committee is, which is to engage in the successful reaching of the mission. The mission of the school is to allow equitable access for academic growth and personal growth. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. I think you got to look at each individual situation. And you can't say, well, all forms of advocacy are permissible, mm-hmm. because there are some forms of advocacy for hate groups that are clearly not going to be permissible. But if we're talking about advocacy for respect for all people, who's not on board with that? So I don't think that there is. Now, the problem with the politicized perspective on this is that one tends, I think, to want to talk about the extremes. And both extremes want to talk about the other extremes. It is not the business, in my opinion, of the school committee to be political in nature or to be advocating political stances. It is in my opinion, the business of a school committee to be advocating for the welfare of children, mm-hmm. And advocating for an atmosphere in which kids can grow and thrive.
Right.
What that means on an individual basis, we'd have to look at the individual case.
And the only problem that I see with that is that you kind of have to set policy. If you decide on one individual case, others would follow. So would the school committees end up having to set policy on what is and is not allowed in a classroom or on a T-shirt or given out during class hours, after class hours? To your point, the students... So, go ahead.
It's a fair question. I think if you look at this sort of the structural role of a school committee. So a school committee is like, if you think about it as a business, the school committee is the sort of board of directors, mm-hmm. and the superintendent is the CEO. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's necessarily the business of the school committee to decide what individual rules at a school should be. That's the purview, I think, of the experts at the school. So the principals and the assistant superintendent and the superintendent, I think the philosophical basis, that is the purview of the school committee.
Okay. I do note from your the Duxbury School Committee's powers and duties that's on the website. The first one is legislation or policy making. So it'll probably end up being something that comes before you, if not now.
Oh, I do not doubt it.
Yeah.
Regrettably, I think you're probably right.
Okay, Jed, so now you have the floor. Make your closing statement and your argument why people should vote for you.
Sure. So briefly, biographically, when I finished college, my first job after college was a high school teacher. I was a mathematics teacher, a German teacher, a psychology teacher, and an English teacher. And after I had done that for a number of years, I went back to graduate school. I got a PhD in clinical psychology, and I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Massachusetts. I did my internship at Children's Hospital in Boston. After several years after that, I took a job with the Department of Defense and went to Europe to coordinate the care of the students of American military and diplomatic personnel in Northern Europe. So my catchment area was Belgium and the Netherlands and Northern Germany. My wife and I returned to Duxbury in 1988. My wife is Diane. She grew up in Duxbury and graduated from Duxbury High School. I spent the next 25 years as the director of counseling at Tabor Academy. I left Tabor 7 years ago to return to private practice, which is what I'm doing now. So my kids grew up in Duxbury. They went to the Duxbury schools K through 8, and then joined me at Tabor for 9 through 12. The reason that I'm running, twofold, I suppose. On the one hand, I think I have a fairly broad range of training and experience that could be useful to the Duxbury School Committee. And secondly, it's simply an opportunity to give back to a town that's been great to live in and great for my kids to grow up in.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. This has been Julie
Sure.
Thompson along with Jed, who's running for school committee in Duxbury. Until next time.